Hello, this is Jeffrey Hansen. I'm going to be your engineering ethics professor for this semester. Um, I am not a PhD, so I am not a doctor. The university thinks that I'd be good for this subject because I have, relatively speaking, the most industry experience, and I do work for the university. I work for the NIUVT program, National Institute for Undersea Vehicle Technology. But before I did that, I worked for the Navy and a pharmaceutical company and a few petroleum companies. In addition to that, I do a lot of connections for the NIUVT with industry. So outside of these slides and presentations and class, if you are looking to get a job, absolutely come see me. I will help you with that. Obviously, I'm going to cater more towards the undersea domain than the rest of the world. Doesn't mean I can't or I won't try to help you find the job that you want. Feel free to call me Professor Hansen or Jack. As long as you're polite, I'm not going to be particularly fussy about what you call me or how you salute me. We're going to go over some housekeeping. First, we're going to go over the syllabus. I'm not going to present the syllabus directly just because it would look a little chunky in PowerPoint format. We're going to quickly go over the description, objective, class setup, grades, and my expected behaviors from you guys. So this is the syllabus. So we're going to go over moral theories. We're going to use dilemmas to explain, and we're going to work through said dilemmas. Now, I'm going to try to do one class straight theory, and I'll go over what those theories are in a few slides, but then we're going to go to, all right, theory's great, but the next lesson we're going to go over, well, why does this matter to you? So we're going to do individual application for you in a professional setting, and then in a global situation where you actually have influence over a company and how your actions and how the company's actions influence everybody else and why ethics matters in those scenarios. And then we're going to go over an actual case study. I have found that a lot of the books that are associated with this class, regardless of author, instead of presenting it as how you'd receive it in the real world, present it a little backwards. Where they'll lead with, 1 million people died from this action, do you think it was unethical? Obviously, in those instances, it's unethical. However, when you look at it from the people who were actually making the decisions, they didn't know that that was what was going to happen. And so they didn't really know what they were doing was unethical because they didn't have all of the information. So I'm going to present it to you as if you're the actual manager, and I'm not going to explain to you what's going to happen next. You have to work with the information that the managers had at that time, and we're going to figure out whether you'd kill people. The class meets Mondays and Wednesdays. After we do the examples, I'm going to need some kind of write-up where you defend your decision. And the reality is a lot of you are going to make the bad or wrong decision. Bad things don't happen because people are evil. Bad things happen because that was the information they provided at the time. Behavior in class. So here's the deal. You're not going to agree on everything we discuss. You're not going to agree with me. And to be honest with you, I don't want you to agree with me. I want you to disagree with me. I want you to show me why I'm wrong. Because I will usually intentionally play as devil's advocate. But that I do require you to be respectful. In a work environment, if you are volatile or hostile, it's not going to work out for you in the long run. The reality is you can be right, but handle it so poorly that nobody agrees with you. So you need to learn to be respectful now, when the repercussions for your actions are not as severe as they will be when you get a job. The next is academic honesty. So AI has recently become available to you. Whenever a new technology comes along, people have heartbreak and freak out a little bit about how we're going to handle this new technology. And in a lot of the cases, like with the internet, a lot of the rules already existed well before the invention of the internet that govern it. It's just you have to think about how the current laws apply. So in the case of AI, if you use it, you have to cite it. Look, my dad went to URI and his professors told him that AutoCAD and SolidWorks were a fad and that nobody was going to use it in the real world and that it was going to go away. I'd guarantee you most people watching this video have taken a SolidWorks class because they know that they're going to have to use it at work. The same thing happened with computers and calculators. One generation said calculators are a fad, they're not a permanent thing, they're going to go away, don't get used to them. They were wrong. Then computers came along and the same thing happened. I'm not going to be that guy that says this is a temporary fad. This has all the hallmarks of something that's going to stick around, so you should get to learn to use it. However, if you were to use MATLAB or SolidWorks or AutoCAD or HYSYS or ANSYS or anything like that for your work, you would have to document that you used it. You don't have to pay them other than, say, maybe a licensing fee that you used it, but you do have to document that you used it. In certain applications, there's a watermark from SolidWorks on the document you can't remove. All I'm asking you to do is to document that you use the AI and how, because that's what the requirement is for the other softwares. Next is if you need to send me an email. I'll do my best to answer all of them regardless of what you put in the subject line. However, if I see EGR 316 as the first thing in the subject line, I'll know it's coming from you guys, and I'll be able to prioritize it a lot easier. Further, sometimes my spam gets nervous when I'm getting new emails from people in waves. By putting this there, I can explicitly tell my computer not to filter you guys out. So if you could, at least for the first, say, month, put EGR 316 into your subject lines, I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, for participation, do this now. I realize this is a video, but if you are doing this instead of going to class today, strongly recommend you do this now. Send me an email. Tell me who you are, what your deal is. Before the next class, I want an email. I want to know in that email who you are. What do you want me to call you? Is your name Jay? Is Jay short for something that has nothing to do with your first name? Let me know. Are you on a sports team? Are you on the sailing team? Do you have some competition you have to go to? Are you part of SWE? Is SWE having some conference that I should know about? Tell me. Look, if you tell me ahead of time you're going to be out, I'll work with you to make sure you don't get penalized for it. If, however, you tell me the day before that you're going on vacation that you knew about for 6 months, I might penalize you for it. So just tell me now. All right? If there's some pertinent information I should know about you, tell me now. If you know that you might be late to class because you're also an EMT and you're going to prioritize getting somebody to the hospital and getting to class, let me know. I'm not going to penalize you for that, but I do need to know about it. All right? And lastly, I really would like to be able to put a name with a face with everybody. I know sometimes that's impossible, and I feel embarrassed when a lot of students come to my office, and I have to ask them what their name is because there's just too many of you. This helps me. Generate an index card. On one side of the index card, I only want your face, nothing but your face. On the other side of the index card is the written information. When it comes to memory, if you do one input, one output, it's a lot easier to memorize everything. So I don't want your name and face on the same side. I'm not going to give you credit if that's what I receive. All right, moral philosophies that we're going to go over this semester. So first we're going to go over the Engineering Code of Ethics. We're going to do that today. We're going to discuss the state of nature, ethical egoism, and utilitarianism together. We're going to discuss Kantianism, virtue theory, social contract theory, and the principle of double effect. I think this semester we're going to lead with social contract theory because the Engineering Code of Ethics is a type of social contract. Repeat after me. Engineers, in the fulfillment of their professional duties, shall hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public, perform services only in areas of their competence, issue public statements only in an objective and truthful manner, act for each employer or client as a faithful agent or trustees, avoid deceptive acts, conduct themselves honorably, responsibly, ethically, and lawfully so as to enhance the honor and reputation and usefulness of the profession. All right, so that was a mouthful. So let's discuss what that means. All right. Hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. So paramount more or less just means the top. So if any of the other rules from the Engineering Code of Ethics contradicts this particular rule, it doesn't apply. This rule is first and foremost the most important thing you need to care about. You have to make sure that everything you do is safe for the public. It is healthy for the public, and you are genuinely caring about the welfare of the public. So when you talk about something being safe, it invokes taking measures to prevent accidents, injuries, or hazards that could potentially cause harm to individuals, property, or the environment. Safety encompasses the identification, assessment, and mitigation of potential risks to ensure the well-being and protection of people and their surroundings. Health, it includes promoting and maintaining optimal health conditions, preventing illness and injury, and providing appropriate medical care when needed. The concept of health encompasses various aspects such as personal health, public health, occupational health, environmental health. Engineers are expected to consider and prioritize the safety and health of the public when carrying out their professional duties. Welfare of the public. This refers to the overall well-being and best interests of society as well. It involves considering and prioritizing the needs, interests, and rights of the public when making decisions and carrying out engineering work. The welfare of the public encompasses a wide range of factors, including but not limited to public safety, public health, environmental impacts, and societal equality. Now, being that this last part tends to be treated as a catch-all, in class and during write-ups, I am going to expect you, if you use this section of the clause, to specify how it's for the general health, or for the welfare of the public. Okay? All right, the next is perform services only in areas of their competence. So this is where things start getting a little more complicated. In engineering, teamwork is crucial. Recognize the specialties within your team, such as mechanical engineering, electrical, software, safety. You're probably going to work with a lot of people who aren't engineers. Logistics, supply chain, finance. While having a basic understanding of each of these roles is beneficial, it's important to respect the depth of expertise each member brings. So, this is a story time. You're probably going to hear about these from other students that have already taken my class. But when I was a young engineer, in the field of engineering, solitary work is quite rare. Engineers typically operate within teams. These specializations often include the roles that I just mentioned. While team members have a basic understanding of each other's roles, they usually don't possess in-depth knowledge of areas outside their own specialties. So that is to say, if you're on a team and you're a mechanical engineer and there's an electrical engineer, you kind of know what electronics are in the system, but you don't know what they're doing. And the electrical engineer kind of understands the mechanics, but he doesn't have an in-depth understanding of what they're doing. And so When working on these projects, it's common for colleagues to inquire about various aspects of the projects, sometimes delving into details of specialties that are not your own. It's important to be cautious in these situations, as misinformation can easily spread and cause complications. So this means avoid stating numbers. Reflecting on my first major assignment as a subcontractor for Shell Corporation, I recall a crucial piece of advice from my boss. As I entered the meeting, I was instructed to observe interactions and take notes, but most importantly, to refrain from mentioning specific numbers. The rationale is straightforward. Even if we gave a rough cost estimate, like $100 million, give or take 20%, could be treated as being misleading. And if there was a misunderstanding, if the final cost slightly exceeded $100 million, say $110 million, even though this is well within the plus or minus 20% range, it could trigger an actual dispute between companies, especially within the finance departments. So we were directed, don't say the numbers. If it's expensive, just say it's very expensive. They wanted us to use qualitative terms. The key lesson here is the value of qualitative over quantitative communication, especially when dealing with sensitive or unconfirmed information. For instance, when discussing confidential matters, it's safer to focus on qualitative descriptions. An example is explaining the capabilities of a torpedo. If I said exactly range, depth, speed, things like that, I could get into a lot of trouble. What I can say is it's designed to sink boats by carrying explosives to the boats. And the charge on the torpedo is sufficiently large to sink the boat. And it needs to be sufficiently fast to catch the boat. And if the boat is able to dive, it needs to be able to sufficiently dive to catch that boat. This approach provides a clear understanding of torpedo functions without delving into the specifics. I didn't really tell you anything about torpedoes, but you know enough to know what they do now. The next is you gotta admit when you don't know something. And to be honest, it tends to be safer to say I don't know. Put it in your vocabulary now if you don't. Say I don't know, I can't speak to that, I'm not qualified to answer that. Direct them to who they should be talking to. Go seek support. You know, you really should be talking to the finance people about the cost. I don't know how much it costs, I just know how it works. Or send them to the electrical engineer or just somebody else if you don't know the answer. What you're allowed to say is, I will check for you, I will figure that out for you, but don't give them a straight answer right then and there. Now, sometimes this is for nefarious reasons. Sometimes they're trying to get you to say a number so that they can latch on to it and cause a problem later. But sometimes, and this is just how some people think, the first piece of information they're given is the only piece of information that gets in. That's why first impressions are so important. Because of that, you have to make sure not to give them a first impression unless they absolutely need it. And being that you're all engineers, you're not going to be working in emergency response. You don't need to give them an answer right now. You don't. So don't. All right. So the next is issue public statements only in an objective and truthful manner. So it's essential that the public can rely on our statements. Accuracy in public information builds trust and credibility. If the public doesn't trust us, we're going to have a lot of trouble. When companies get treated like they're risky, unreliable, unsafe, their lives become harder. When the Boeing Supermax started dive bombing, whole countries started forbidding them from flying in their airspace. And for good reason. This was a huge problem for Boeing. And you know what? I don't blame anybody for not trusting Boeing because of the way they handled it. You have to be in a situation where if something goes wrong, it's clear that you're going to fix it and not try to dump blame on somebody else. Avoid subjective language. Do not use the phrase I feel or I think. You are engineers. You have to use objective, quality evidence, evidence-based discussions. Be clear and objective. So don't say, I think the bridge is safe. Say, based on comprehensive analysis and testing, we confirm that the bridge's structural integrity aligns with all safety standards, ensuring its readiness for the public. Another thing about this statement is if somebody wants to argue with you, you can show them the standards and you can show them the testing and basically force them to argue the standard. At which point it's going to be a lot harder for them because the standard exists for a reason. Standards don't exist because people felt that they'd be nice. Standards exist because it's been shown to work. Use simplified terminology. Don't say, don't worry about it, it's a 1 in 15,000 chance. That doesn't mean anything to anybody. And I'll be honest with you, I know you're all engineers, but I'd be willing to bet the only concept of chance you really understand is flipping a coin. What you say to them instead is, the chances that you're talking about are like getting hit by lightning. People understand that. They understand it's rare. And they're happy with it. The last is address public concerns. Look, public's going to get scared. They're going to do it a lot. And dismissing their concern is a problem. If you dismiss their concern, that is a hallmark of there actually being a problem. You ignoring it. So what you have to do is say things like, I understand you're scared, and I respect that. And here's how I'm going to help you deal with your fear. I'm going to give you information that reassures you that nothing bad's going to happen. And that reassurance needs to be fact-based. The communication also needs to be empathetic. That means you say, I understand your feelings. I understand that this can be scary. You don't criticize them. No matter how unfounded their fear is, you do not criticize them, because that just will make the situation worse. All right. Act for each employer or client as a faithful agent or trustee. So, when discussing loyalty in a professional context, it's important to understand that it's not about dedicating your entire existence to your company or manager. Rather, it's about prioritizing the success of your company over that of other companies. This doesn't mean sacrificing your personal life or values. It's about aligning your work with the company's goals to achieve mutual success. As engineers, our responsibility is to deliver the best possible product to our company. Initially, this involves understanding the basics of your industry and the specific workings within your company. And you're going to absorb this more or less through osmosis, just showing up and working with your boss every day. However, there's going to be a point where passive learning isn't enough. You must actively seek out specialized training or skill development, whether it's in project management or technical skills or other areas that could benefit our company. It's also crucial to be transparent about your personal goals and needs from the outset. Whether it's about owning a home, traveling, starting a family, acknowledging these goals means recognizing the needs for a supporting income. Don't let anyone guilt you into accepting less than you deserve, and they're gonna try. Your personal goals are valid, and you should be part of your professional discussion. In collaborations with suppliers, contractors, or consumers, clear communication is key. Establish up front what both parties expect from the relationship. This sets a reasonable boundary and ensures mutual understanding and respect. Confidentiality is non-negotiable. Working with sensitive information requires discretion and trustworthiness. In competitive environments, information leakage to your rival can undermine your company's efforts and breach your loyalty. Remember, being a trusted individual has immense value. And depending on who you work for, they might literally kill you for sharing information incorrectly. However, it's equally important to navigate transparency with external partners. For example, if a cost increase is imminent due to a supplier change, it's ethical and often necessary to inform the consumer about these impending changes to help them prepare accordingly. In summary, loyalty in a professional setting is about balancing the success of your company with your personal growth and ethical standards. It's about being a reliable, trustworthy, and proactive member of your organization while maintaining clear and honest communication with all stakeholders. All right, avoid deceptive acts. So some of this seems pretty straightforward. Um, don't lie. Um, and even avoid the appearance of lying, which it sounds easy, but it's actually kind of hard. So equally important is being aware that you may encounter deceit in the workplace. In my first project, I managed a budget of over $10 million. This sounded like a lot to me at the time, but this level of responsibility is not unusual, and it's something you might also experience in your career up front. With substantial budgets, be prepared for some individuals who might attempt to deceive you to gain a portion of that funding. Conversely, be aware that you may be perceived with suspicion for the same exact reason. To navigate this, it's imperative to establish yourself as a trustworthy professional. First and foremost, never lie. The damage to your reputation from even a single act of deception can be long-lasting and might even necessitate a career change to overcome it. When receiving advice from subject matter experts, SMEs, always ask for justification and apply the 5 whys technique to understand the reasoning. If a SME becomes defensive during this questioning, approach their advice with extreme caution. When conveying their advice to others, clearly attribute it to them. Specify it's their area of expertise, they're the expert. Be mindful of some so-called SMEs may only have marginally more experience than you. Despite this, they often command significantly higher salaries, and some may claim expertise primarily to justify their pay. It's prudent to verify their expertise and value they bring. In this context, Machiavelli's advice about using and testing your mercenaries is applicable. By openly stating your reliance on the SMEs and their supposed expertise, you place the responsibility on them to validate their advice. If their guidance proves faulty, which is not uncommon, and unfortunately far more common than is comfortable, this approach protects you by having made their role and accountability clear. Always conduct thorough due diligence. Sometimes you cannot wait for the SME to make a mistake. You personally need to make sure that you're getting good advice. Really, you should always be doing this, but time and budget constraints can cause problems, and you can't. Make a point to gather evidence and proof to back up your decision and actions. This not only ensures you're making well-informed decisions, but also demonstrates your commitment to integrity and thoroughness in the work. While working on a novel weapons system for the Navy, I was part of a team that included reputed subject matter experts in this domain. Notably, my father is, still to this day, a recognized authority in the field, and I recognized several of his peers at the meeting, though not as many as I would have liked. During the meeting, a relatively young man, slightly older than me, confidently represented himself as an expert. The meeting began with a captain who held a PhD in mechanical engineering and boasted 30 years of experience with this specific weapon system, clarified to the team, in Navy context and in general Department of Defense context, there is a difference between a simulation and a model. A model is a tangible object. You can pick it up and you can play with it. A simulation is a computer model. He did not want to see or hear anybody call a simulation a model. Even if it was a computer model, he wanted to be called a simulation. And there's a reason for this. You can tell a computer model to defy the laws of physics. However, if you build an airplane model and throw it out the window, it's going to follow the laws of physics. So there's a lot more value put into models than simulations. A pivotal moment arose when discussing the current capabilities of the weapon system. The captain, my father's colleagues, well versed with systems, with the system's functional range, listened as the young supposed expert claimed the existing design allowed for a 10% increase in both range and speed. Such a statement is significant. When it comes to cutting-edge technology, improving it beyond 5% is a massive improvement. And this gentleman was saying he was getting 10%. However, it was clear that he was referring to an existing design, not the new design. My father's colleague initiated the 5 whys. He wanted to figure out what was going on. Something didn't sound right here. The promise was too big and too great to ignore. So the first thing he did was resources. He wanted to figure out the source of the data. So he says to the young man, "How did you get those numbers?" And the young expert replied, "We've constructed a model, and that's what the testing showed." Now, in reality, my father's colleague, a Newark employee, he almost immediately knew what happened. This gentleman was talking about a computer simulation, and he had made the wrong inputs. And he was trying to politely walk this man backwards from his comments, because he said this in front of 50 people, including a handful of PhDs and a handful of captains. So he says, when you say model, do you mean a computer simulation or do you mean a tangible model? And the young expert said, I mean a tangible model. So, expert has now doubled down and said, this is the path I've chosen to live. And the Newark employee responded back with, in the field, we've only seen results X and Y, and you're telling us you're getting 10% more than X and Y. I'm concerned that testing parameters may be unrealistic. Can we see this model? Can we see the test setup? Where was this testing done? Can you show it to us? At which point, the expert, instead of saying, yes, you can see the model, yes, I'll show you the test setup, he said, I'm a subject matter expert. I assure you the testing was done correctly. At this point, the young expert began to take all of the questions really personally. And instead of directly answering our questions with technical information, objective information, he got really personal with everyone involved and started criticizing everybody. And at this point, the 5 whys had to stop, because in a professional setting, if somebody gets this kind of upset, you need to back off. That's when the captain intervened. And he more or less started proceeding down the same path, the 5 whys. Like, I need to see this thing. And the young subject matter expert put his hand up in the face of the captain and said, I am an expert. You are just a military grunt. And started criticizing the captain. Keep in mind, the captain had a PhD in mechanical engineering. This guy wasn't a schmuck. And the captain was having none of this. This was a $1 billion program. He wasn't going to take anybody's word, because you should just trust it. So he emphasized how critical it was to have objective information, quality evidence, rather than relying solely on the assertions of one individual. So Smee doesn't give up. He's still getting in everybody's face. So that's when the captain looked directly at this guy's supervisor and said, you're going to show me this model, or I'm going to change personnel and we're going to severely reduce the scope of work we're giving to you. Because at this point, I can't trust anything or any information you provided to me. This is a tactic adopted by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing and are just trying to scam. So Subject matter expert's supervisor made him get up and show us the model. All 50 people got up, followed this guy to his office, and then it became clear that his model was a simulation. Not only that, when we went over the inputs and everybody was standing over his shoulders looking at his inputs, they were wrong. The weapon system he had made existed in a physical system that is it just doesn't exist. You can't make it exist. It's not gonna. After this, for the rest of the meeting, whenever the subject matter experts from that company tried to assert that their knowledge was great and their performances were good, all we could think about was, you just had this guy have a massive meltdown over poor work. Why should we give you any more money or give you any more of our time? I'll be honest with you, I never saw the subject matter expert again, and I'm guessing he was relieved of duty for his behavior, but it made the rest of his company look awful and really encouraged the Navy and our organization not to give them any more money. So you have to make sure you're not that guy, okay? The last and the things you're probably going to be the most guilty of is neglecting to verify and relying on unreliable sources. So verification is more or less due diligence. Due diligence is going and getting the information to validate your point. But say, hypothetically, you're using a SME, and you don't cite the SME, you just say, this was the advice that was given to me and it's wrong. People are going to treat you like you just made it up, and you don't want that. And if you start using scales that everybody else knows to be faulty, and you say this thing weighs 10 pounds, but the scale is always off by a few pounds, you're relying on an unreliable source. So you need to make sure you're not doing any of that. All right, and this is the last part of the Engineering Code of Ethics that you need to memorize for this class. Conduct themselves honorably, responsibly, ethically, and lawfully. So, in alignment with the principles of honorable conduct, responsible practices, ethical considerations, and lawful practices outlined in the slide, it's vital to recognize how these qualities intersect with professional success and team collaboration. Success in your career is not just about individual talent or innate ability. While such traits may offer an initial advantage, true excellence in the professional world is often the result of consistent practice and dedication. The best in the field are those who commit to doing the best every day. These individuals seek a work environment where they don't have to worry about ethical dilemmas or legal complications. They value peace of mind, knowing that their workplace upholds high standards of integrity and responsibility. If you exhibit dishonorable, irresponsible, unethical, unlawful behavior, it creates stress and uncertainty among your team. Talented professionals, many of whom have families and personal responsibilities, cannot afford to associate with such risks. They need the assurance that their work environment is safe, ethical, and compliant with legal standards. Any deviation from these principles can lead to talented individuals distancing themselves to protect their professional and personal interests. Therefore, it's imperative to embody these ethical principles not only for your personal growth, but also for fostering a thriving, supportive, and stable work environment. This approach ensures that you and your team can go home each day with a clear conscience, secure in the knowledge that your collective efforts contributed positively to society, respect legal norms, and support each other's well-being. Quickly discuss what's a dilemma. So when we're talking about ethics and situations you're really going to run into as a professional, 9 times out of 10, what you're going to run into is just work. You're going to get a task, and you're going to have to do it, and you're going to know what to do, and it's not going to be a big deal. You might have to go talk to your boss about specifics of getting the job done, but for the most part, it's not really a dilemma, it's just work. When this class is applicable is when something's a dilemma. And if it's not a dilemma, it's not really something that you should get stressed out about. So what is it?
Would you rather be able to fly or be able to teleport?
Teleport. That's an easy one. Like you can just teleport to anywhere in the world. It's so practical.
Right? No, you totally choose flying because imagine having the feeling of like soaring through the air.
Would you rather have $1 million or your body is always in amazing shape no matter what you eat?
$1 million. No. You have to pick amazing shape because then you can make money with your body. Like be a prostitute. So yeah, like use your body to make that money.
Okay.
I've got one. Okay, so would you rather have sex with like the hottest Hollywood model or have to chop your own leg off with a rusty knife?
Well,
The Hollywood model.
yeah, absolutely. Sex with the Hollywood superstar.
You would, right? Like that's what you'd pick, yeah?
You know how this game works, eh? Like it's about two things that are kind of similar, so it's a difficult choice.
Oh no, I've done it wrong, haven't I? Oh, sorry. I've got another one. Here we go. So, would you rather have like the entire car collection of the world? So you got like Lamborghinis and Maseratis and Aston Martins, or you have to kill your own family?
The cars.
The car collection. Do you understand? Do you know how to play this game?
Yeah, you pick the two things and you have to pick between the two things, right?
Yeah. So that's supposed to be like, it's supposed to be a difficult decision.
Okay. For example, would you like a car collection?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Then you drive it all the time and stuff.
Yeah. And would you like to kill your family?
No, that's bloody horrible.
Exactly. So it's a really easy choice. Do you understand what I'm kind of?
Oh, I've done it wrong again. Oh, no. Okay. I've got it this time. I know what to do. Okay, so would you rather have eternal happiness for the rest of your life, or die?
A dilemma? Well, the definition of a dilemma is a situation in which a difficult choice has to be made between two or more alternatives, especially ones that are equally undesirable or mutually exclusive. You might know these as being between a rock and a hard place, being given a catch-22, an impasse, choosing between Scylla and Charybdis. I can't pronounce that. That's, if you've read the Odyssey, that's the part where Odysseus has to choose between being attacked by one monster versus the other. And what's not a dilemma? All right, where a clear, straightforward choice is available, or where the decision-making process is uncomplicated and doesn't involve choosing between equally undesirable options. It's typically a scenario where the path forward is evident with no significant conflict or difficult trade-offs. You might know these as no-brainers, clear-cut, obvious choice, or shooting fish in a barrel. This is where you want to be. This is where you are probably going to spend the vast majority of your professional time. If you are here, you do not really need to rely on the skills you're going to learn in this class. And you should spend as much of your time making sure you stay here as possible. When you are presented with a dilemma, before you make any decisions, you have to define that dilemma. Not fully understanding the dilemma that's in front of you tends to lead to bad decisions, making the situation worse or bad for others. So the first thing you want to do is clearly define the dilemma. Describe the background. Describe the situation in and of itself. Then define your options. What are they? Identify alternatives. Consider the consequences of your actions, and then apply ethical considerations. What does ethics say about the situation? Then you need to assess the impacts. And you have to have good reasoning for your assessment. If you say something's unsafe, you need to make it clear as to why it's unsafe. If you say something's unsafe, but you do not explain it, and a reasonable person reads what you say and identifies that it's not unsafe, that it is in fact quite safe, but you're calling it unsafe, you're going to be uncredible. That is to say, they won't trust what you have to say moving forward the next time around, right? So you have to explain it. Why is this thing unsafe? Why is one option safer than the other? You need to use quantifiable, objective terms. You need to point out when something is uncertain or complex. And then you have to define a reasonable reasoning process. That's going to end up being some of the ethical theories we go over. And then you have to define a resolution, and you have to reflect on it. So this is going to be a recurring dilemma. This is something you might actually have to deal with as an adult, especially in an engineering application. I want you to consider for a moment if you work at a factory. In this case, it's a pharmaceutical factory. And your regulating body, so in this case the FDA, performs their 2-year audit. Now, this is a unique situation with the FDA where it can actually shut down your factory if you don't do what they tell you to do. But they have found several easily addressable issues that you need to fix. You haven't passed the FDA's inspection, but once you've addressed these issues, you will. And this is very common. It's rare or unheard of for the FDA to come in and not find something. A lot of times, you're better off having them find a bunch of little things that you can address than them coming in and leaving. Because that means they might be coming back with actual guns. And this has happened in Boston before. A company was doing such a terrible job at making drugs, and that they were actually making poison instead and selling it, that the FDA had to leave and get the police and have the police come back with them. So you would much rather have the FDA show up, find a couple things that they don't like, and say, you need to fix these, and then have them leave. Because that means that's all they found wrong. And it tends to be, they don't like the way you documented stuff. They don't like the way your reports were written. They'd prefer if you used a different format. You used MLA instead of API. Big deal, easy to fix. For unrelated reasons, the owner wants to retire by liquidating the assets in the factory and firing the staff. For small businesses, this isn't unheard of. Look, it's really stressful to run a business, and factories are expensive to own and operate. If he's just too tired and old to do it, that's actually not that unreasonable a thing for him to do. However, he's being nice. He doesn't want to fire the staff, but he's just too old to run the factory anymore. So he's trying to find outside investors to come and buy the entire factory at once instead of having to liquidate. An investor who is new to pharmaceuticals is interested in purchasing the factory and keeping it running instead. This is normal, especially in the pharmaceutical industry. It's a lot easier to buy your way in, so that way you own one factory and you kind of learn the ins and outs of the industry and then expand from there than it is to start a whole new factory. So they're unfamiliar with the FDA processes and assume that bringing the factory from failing to passing is a long, expensive process. In other industries, that might be a true statement. However, in this case, in pharmaceuticals, it's really honest to God, we don't like the way you're documenting things. You can still keep selling your drugs, but by the end of the year, or the end of this quarter, we need written proof that you've addressed our concerns, and then we can move forward. However, if you spend too much time discussing the issue with the investor, they'll get nervous and move on to another facility that has already passed. So that is to say, 6 months ago, that facility had the FDA show up. FDA had their complaints. That facility then addressed the FDA's complaints, and now they're ready to sell. The two facilities will be in more or less the same position in 6 months, but right now, you have to deal with the FDA. This is objectively the most profitable option for the investor. You also know the owner will liquidate the factory. That is to say, sell all of the individual pieces that make up the factory. And by the time the investor is actually in charge, you will have passed the inspection. Transferring ownership of large facilities takes time, takes lawyers, and usually it's done in chunks. So by the time that this investor would actually own the facility, you would actually have passed. Do you lie and say you passed? Well, I want you to think for a moment. What were the requirements, or what were the rules that you have to follow based off of NSPE? So the first one was don't do anything unsafe. Is anything about this unsafe? Are you in any way jeopardizing the welfare of the public by doing this? You could make the argument, objectively, that since the FDA hasn't shut you down, the FDA has said you could keep selling drugs, the regulating body has confirmed that you are of no risk to the general public. And if it was severe enough that OSHA needs to get involved, the FDA probably would have reported it. So I'm going to let you pause it for a few minutes, and then we're going to discuss possible solutions to this problem. All right, so pause it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. When you describe a dilemma, in this case, I have color-coded a reasonable answer. If you go back a few slides to when I defined what a dilemma is, it's the same color code. This is an appropriate response to a dilemma. You describe the dilemma. You're not sure whether you should lie about the FDA inspection or not, whether you should lie to the investor or not. You define your options. You tell the truth about the FDA status, risking the investor's withdrawal, or you falsely claim compliance to keep the investor interested. Define the complexities, and you define the possible solutions moving forward. This is doing its best job to stay objective. It's treating both options as reasonably equal options. That's extremely important in this discussion. If one of them was blatantly wrong and the other one was blatantly right, it wouldn't be a dilemma. You're in a catch-22 here. Yes, lying to the investor in and of itself is immoral. However, making the decision and taking the action to cause your coworkers to lose their jobs and go hungry is also immoral. And which one is more or less immoral is subjective. That's unique to the individual. So you can't say one is clearly better than the other. They're both bad. All right, this is how not to describe a dilemma. In the first two sentences, it clearly says what not to do. It does not give weight to the other option. It just goes one-sided up front and stays on that side. Now, don't get me wrong, I agree, lying is wrong. But it's totally ignoring the fact that you're going to cause your coworkers to go hungry.